Record. We are up to chapter 4, and we are going to be continuing on with a lot of the mashal, the analogy, the dominance. Remember, that's the root of the word mashal, moshel, to rule, to be authoritative, of the sun and the sun rays. So just a very quick review of the rules of a mashal. Because what can happen is we get so caught up in the mashal that we forget what the objective is, what is called the nimshal. The nimshal is the lesson we learn from the mashal, what is mashalized. I don't know what the word is. Got to be word for that in English literature, but I don't know what it is. A mashal is dependent on three factors, or the efficacy of a mashal is dependent on three factors. Number one, the more the master understands the concept, the more he is able to make the mashal accessible to more and more people. Classic example, Shlomo HaMelech had 3,000 mashalim, Reb Meir had 300 mashalim, and Rabbi Yochanan had 3 mashalim. So again, of course, you can just endlessly make up new ways of saying the same thing. When we talk about these various numbers, we mean various degrees in the effectiveness of the mashal. A mashal, when it comes to Hashem, is only effective or is only referencing the impact Hashem has on the world, not atzmus. Like we've talked so many times before, when we talk about other people, we have a tendency to talk about their impact on us. This is my bus driver, this is my friend, and so on, because that's our frame of reference. We don't necessarily know who the person is within their very essence. And finally, another very important point is that every mashal is always going to be imperfect. And as you push and push and push, it will fail. And this is the first issue that we're going to be addressing in the beginning of chapter 4, which is the imperfection of the mashal of the sun ray in the sun. So remember, just a very simple summary of that mashal. If I'm outside and I see a single sun ray on the sidewalk, I identify that sun ray. If I were to follow it back all the way into the sun, it would, of course, disappear into the ball of the sun. So what I appreciate and what appears to be so tangibly real to me is only a very mild expression of something so much more intense that I can't even imagine. And as I trace back what I think is truly in existence to its origin, it ceases to have any existence at all. It has no identity. Well, that's the mashal. The nimshal, the lesson is that what we see as being tangible and real, which is creation, is only a very slight glimmer, an expression of the full-on intensity of the creator. And the more we're able to trace the creation back to its origin, the more or the less the creation has any identity. And kula kameh, as all things come before him, koloich shiv, they have zero significance. So we have established essentially these two perspectives. One, nothing really exists. No thing really exists because its existence is only perceived because it is detached and separated from the source of its existence. The sun ray appears to have independent identity only because it is separated out, or is distanced, not separated, wrong word, is distanced from the sun. That's what's called Das Elyon. Translation, the higher knowledge, but it's not higher as in superior. It's higher as in, this is Hashem's perspective. The way Hashem sees it is there's only his existence and everything else exists within him. Then there's our perception that we exist and we recognize that we are dependent on Hashem. So again, Paro, who's the ultimate antithesis of Kedusha, says, I exist and I am not dependent on anything else. This is my river and I made it. That's clearly a denial of Hashem. But even within the acknowledgement of Hashem, we have two different perspectives. One perspective is I exist and my existence is dependent on Hashem. And this is not evil. It's not like Paro. And in fact, it's an entryway into our relationship with Hashem. As the Alter Rebbe mentioned at the end of the Sefer Shel Beinanim, that since a person desires to be alive, and they understand that their greatest gift is that they are alive, so too, the fact that they recognize that Hashem is the source of their existence gives them a great appreciation for Hashem. I want to be alive. Hashem gives me life, and therefore I have great appreciation for Hashem. That's true and valid and so forth. But for that, we don't need to have the revelation at Sinai. For that, I mean, to use, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say this, but to use it as an analogy. We know the story that Avram Avinu, and there's a whole variety of perspectives about whether when he was only 3 years old, that is, it's so basic that even a 3-year-old could understand it. Or the Rambam says when he was 40, which is not, he's not quibbling over the date. He's saying, is it require more matured intelligence? But either way, intelligence can bring you to an awareness of Hashem. Because if there's a creation, there's got to be a creator. If there's a watch, there's got to be a watchmaker. That's a basic, logically deductible conclusion that does not require transformation of my identity. It doesn't require abandoning my innate perspective. If there's a watch, there must be a watchmaker. That's what we call das tachton. It's translated as lower level, but not lower as an inferior, but it is the perspective from our human perception. We begin with the assertion that I exist, and if I exist, there must be something that makes me exist. And that's not only true of me personally, but of the creation, et cetera, et cetera. What Chassidus is bringing us to, that is a gift that comes from above, is an understanding of Hashem as the only existence, not beginning with the premise of my own existence. Now, not only does this have a conceptual difference, it's also ultimately going to have a very pragmatic difference. To take the extreme, if my perception is that I exist and therefore Hashem must exist, so Hashem's existence is validated by my existence, ipso facto, Hashem's importance is how much he does for me. So if we take the perception that I exist and therefore there must be something that makes me exist, so then I become the center. I exist. And therefore, Hashem's existence is further validated by how much he serves my existence, which could be summarized in the classic question, well, why do you like Shabbos so much? Which we're not against liking it. What we have to always remember is, you know why we keep Shabbos? Because Hashem said so. That's why we keep Shabbos. That's why we do every mitzvah. So what the Alter Rebbe is offering us is a chance, or is a glimpse into a whole other reality that doesn't negate the reality of my existence, but it begins with the premise of Hashem's existence. This concept is summarized in a line, the bumper sticker that reads, godliness is presumed and creation is innovation. In Hebrew, elokus b'pshitis, that's the obvious thing, that's for sure. And creation, that's the novelty. As opposed to, I'm here, well, do you believe in God? Meaning the presumption being that I'm here, I exist, and then I speculate about whether or not God exists. And we want to take the opposite perspective and say that God exists, and it's a worthwhile discussion as to whether or not we exist, which even though we ultimately conclude that we do exist, we recognize that that is the question more than is, or in contrast to God's existence, which is not a question. Now, this is alluded to a little bit, as we mentioned in the end of the last chapter, in chapter 3, the Alter Rebbe left off with a question. How is it possible that we exist? Because unlike the sun ray and the sun, remember, this is where the mashal breaks down, where the sun ray has identification. You could even measure it, its brightness, its heat, and so forth. So that's because the sun is millions of miles away, however far away it is. And therefore, the sun ray seems to have existence. However, when we start looking at the nimshal, what this is meant to teach us, we are talking about the infinity of Hashem. So why do I think that the pencil exists? So again, we'd say, well, like the sun ray, because godliness is millions of miles away. But that's where it breaks down, because godliness is here. I mean, if the sun was on the block, I wouldn't think the sun ray existed. So how come I think, and it is even factual, that I exist when the source, the creator, isn't in the room with me? So this is where we left off in the end of the last chapter. And we talked about this oddity where we're, quote unquote, not recommended to leave off with questions, because then people could have doubts and so forth. And we explained that that's a valid strategy when the question is about Hashem. The Alter Rebbe left us with a question, which we've waited a week on, and we've been thinking for the past week, well, maybe I don't exist. And that's okay, even though I do exist ultimately. But that we should consider that I don't truly exist is a worthwhile question to marinate in for a little bit, because it counters that absolute presumption of my own existence. And again, we find this in every story of conflict. It's all about I exist, and therefore I'll do what I want to do. One of the interpretations as to why the first word of the Ten Commandments is Anochi, I am, is because Hashem is saying, look, let's get one thing straight. I am. Whether or not you are is debatable, but it's not debatable whether or not I am. I truly am. So here in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to talk about the levels of Chesed and Kivura primarily, and we're going to be really fixating on a concept which we have talked about many times, which is the concept of Tzimtzum, and how the appearance of Hashem's non-presence is not evidence of Hashem's non-presence, and why it is that we don't see Hashem's overwhelming presence within our direct line of vision constantly and continuously. So we're going to see. The first beginning of the parak speaks about Chesed, described as Gedula. We'll talk about that. And the second half speaks about Tzimtzum and Kivura. We'll talk about that. And again, it's always important, just a general reminder, that whenever we talk about the midas, the measurable characteristics of Hashem, remember the word midah means a measurement, like a yard or an hour is a measurement, it's a midah. We are talking about something that we can identify. It is not the essence of Hashem. It is the way in which Hashem expresses himself. We cannot understand the essence of Hashem. If we would know him, we would be him, we would cease to have our own identity. So here in chapters 4 through 6, we're going to also be talking about a concept that's in the Medrash that Rashi quotes. And remember, when Rashi quotes something in his commentary on the Chumash, it means it's directly relevant to the narrative of the story. You won't be able to follow the narrative of the story without this awareness. And Rashi says that Hashem initially planned to create, and that's the key word, the world with Kivura. Kivura translates as strength or limitation. Also manifests itself in absolute justice, both on the upside and the downside, so that as Hashem was going to create the world with Kivura, so that immediate consequence to all behavior, but Hashem saw that the world would not be sustainable with Kivura, and therefore Hashem added the characteristic of compassion. And compassion means I recognize who deserves and who doesn't deserve, yet rather than only giving to those who deserve and withholding from those who don't, which is a Kivura characteristic, Hashem says, I will give even to those who don't deserve. Now, an issue which we won't get till the end of the chapter, but people are probably familiar with this medrash, but just to leave it in the back of your head, is, as the Alter Rebbe will point out, this statement says Hashem initially intended to create the world with Kivura. So the question is, how can you create with Kivura? Isn't Kivura a restraint? Kivura is not about an action, it's about restraint. So it doesn't just say that Hashem was going to conduct the world with Kivura, with instantaneous consequence. The statement is that Hashem is going to create the world with Kivura. And how is it possible to create with Kivura when Kivura is about restraining, not about creating? So that's going to be addressed towards the end of the chapter, but it's an important idea to keep in mind. Okay, chapter 4 begins with a quote from Tehillim. It happens to be in chapter 84, pasuk 12 of Tehillim, that reads the following: Ki hine ksiv, behold, it is written, Ki shemesh u'magen Hashem Elokim. Translation: like the sun and its shield, or its screen. I mean, we tend to think of a shield as being defensive, but here the term magen means a screen, which is about filtering out what is forthcoming rather than protecting from incoming. So we are describing Hashem Elokim as Shemesh u'magen, sun and shield. Now, the standard interpretation of this pasuk is that there are two separate characteristics. Hashem shines like the sun, and Hashem protects. Magen, just like the sun and its shield are two separate entities, so too Chesed, shining, and Kivura, restraint, are two separate ideas. The chiddush that Tanya, the innovative point that Tanya is going to make, is that the shielding is part of the shining of the sun, protecting us from overexposure. Now, there is a totally secular theory as to why has the image of the fairy tale of the fairy godmother and the wicked stepmother endured throughout every culture and every generation. This is a standard fairy tale everybody is familiar with. So this children's story, the philosophy goes, is because it's the way in which the child copes with the conflict he has about his mother. I mean, it's very Freudian, but again, take it for what it's worth. So he says to himself, how can this same person, take care of me and make me feel safe and protected and educate me and love me, and make me brush my teeth and do my homework and not let me roller skate on Lakeshore Drive? I mean, how can this one entity have this conflicting set of interactions with me? So this theory goes, the child imagines in their head that this is really two separate beings. The mother, who's kind and loving and caring and nurturing, is the fairy godmother mother. And the mother who's restrictive and denying and withholding is the wicked stepmother mother. And this is the child's way of sort of coping with this apparent contradiction in his life. This is a theory, it's a totally secular thing, but I think it may help us understand this. Lahavdil, we're not here to study comparative religions. This is the way. They say, well, God does this, and this other entity, the devil, does that. This is, of course, something that we absolutely have to reject because there's nothing other than Hashem. So when we talk about Kivura, now it's important to remember that Kivura is not depicted by cruelty. Kivura, and this is the point Alter Rebbe is making, it's not that, well, when it's a sunny day, that's Hashem. And when my plans for a picnic get ruined by the rain, that's some other being. That's Hashem being Kivura. The point Alter Rebbe is going to be making here is that when it's a sunny day, that's also Kivura, because if it was pure chesed, it would be a scorching day. Meaning if Hashem was overwhelmingly present, Hashem, it was not restraining himself, We think all we want is to see Hashem, which it's true, but it could be a little overwhelming. So Hashem calibrates the expression of his identity so that we do not become shockingly, what's the word I'm looking for, overwhelmed by it. So here we go. Peresh, what does this mean? So again, the standard interpretation is that this is two separate entities, the sun and the screen, and these are two separate aspects of Hashem. One is Hashem, the Chesed Hashem, and the other is the Kivura Hashem. Peresh Magain, who near tak l'shemesh. What is a Magain? What is literally a shield? Like Magain David, we all know that. What it literally means is the shield that David wore in battle. Who near tak l'shemesh. It is a screen for the sun. Lahagain, to protect us. Sheichelu habriyos lizbo. Like, in order to for creation to be able to carry it. That's what it literally means, or to tolerate it. Now, what is our evidence that without this nirtak, without the screen, we would not be able to tolerate it? So the Alter Rebbe explains, like it tells us in the Gemara, la'asid lavai, in the future time, meaning in the time of Mashiach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu moitzi chama min nirtaka, Hashem will take the sun out of this protective screen, and the wicked will be judged by it. Meaning, if Hashem were to pull out this shield as a penalizing mechanism so that the wicked would be thus punished, we see that even though the shield currently is dimming, that's actually a benefit. And we have an example of this in the Chumash. You remember the story that immediately after Avram Avinu has his bris, so Hashem wants to give Avram the day off. So he makes the sun very hot. So what happens when the sun is so hot? Travelers won't come. Everyone's familiar with the story, I assume. So what happens? Avram becomes that much more pained that he doesn't have anyone to whom to show kindness. So Hashem sends him the three strangers, and one they turn out to be angels. I'm going to assume everybody here remembers that story. If not, jump in. Now, Chassidus asks the obvious question: what is Hashem's objective in making it extra hot? To prevent Avram from being bothered by guests. What is the consequence of Hashem making it extra hot and Avram not having any guests? He's further bothered by that, right? Now, he doesn't have any guests. So Hashem made a mistake, obviously, quote unquote, meaning Hashem's intention was that he shouldn't bother Avram with any guests. So he took the sun out of its screen. But what happened was it only made Avram more upset that he didn't have any guests to show hospitality to. So it backfired. This didn't work. So Chassidus explains exactly what we've said here. What happens when the sun, when godliness is more revealed? So two things happen. The wicked will be punished, and the righteous will be inspired to greater righteousness. So just to answer that question and then tie it back into what we're saying. It's true that at the beginning of the day, Avram would have been benefited by having the day off. He just had the bris, this whole trauma. He would have been benefited by having the day off. What happened? Hashem made it extra hot, meaning there was a greater revelation of godliness. Even at the more pshat level, Hashem changed all of nature to help Avram. When Hashem made this, I'll call it effort, to be more accommodating to Avram Avinu. So Avram was, wow, look what Hashem has done for me. I want to do something for Hashem. What do I want to do? I want to be welcoming of guests. So it's not that Hashem miscalculated, of course. I mean, I'm being facetious. It's not that Hashem miscalculated and said, whoops, I thought this was going to help him and only wound up bothering him. It's by Hashem helping Avram that Avram became more inspired to want to have guests. So what we see is the greater revelation by taking the sun out of its screen means, by taking the sun out of its screen is a greater revelation of godliness. Now, why does this punish the wicked? We don't dwell on it, but just to answer the full question. So we find an interesting medrash. The medrash tells us that the nations of the world complain to Hashem, it's not fair. If we would have mitzvahs, we would also, be sanctified and holy. So Hashem decided to give them a specific mitzvah, the mitzvah of sukkah. So they enthusiastically built sukkahs, and to make a semi-anti-Semitic joke, when Goyim build it, it's a good sukkah. It's not going to fall down like when Jews build it. So they build this beautiful, glamorous sukkah, and they're very, very enthusiastic about sitting in the sukkah. But what happens? Hashem made it extra hot, and they were so uncomfortable that they kicked the sukkah on the way out. That's the story. So, of course, we ask, what's going on here? So we explain, look, why is Hashem doing that to them? Why is Hashem making it extra hot? That doesn't seem to be fair. But now we understand. They said they wanted to be close to Hashem. Why does Hashem give them sukkah? Why doesn't he give them, shofar or whatever it may be? Because the sukkah means that you're completely subsumed within the infinity of Hashem, which they were. And then comes along this sun, again, suggestive of total revelation of godliness. And that was overwhelming to them, so that they kicked the sukkah. That is, they despise this overwhelming level of godliness. It's a little too much. Now, again, at some social level, we may be able to appreciate this. It's like the classic Chabad house thing. A person like just barely pokes their head in, and we've signed them up for camp, we're sending them off to yeshiva, we're coming to their house with a blowtorch. It's like, well, I just want to sort of dip my toes in. So this is that idea that the sun's screen, or the screen, is there to protect us, not just to withhold. And this is kind of the chiddush, that the Kivura, which is the restraint of the expression, is not designed to be just withholding and not forthcoming. Its design is to be calibrating of the amount of godliness that is expressed, so as not to, pardon the term, the pun, sunburn the neshama. So here the Alter Rebbe says, again, by quoting this story, just to finish that idea, by quoting this statement of Chazal, that Hashem will take the sun out of its screen, it illustrates that it's currently in its screen to protect us, not to be withholding. And again, that's why Kivura gets a bum rap. Kivura is not designed to be mean. Kivura is not designed to just be withholding. It's designed to protect us from being overwhelmed. Kamoisha nirtek, just like the screen. Magain ba'ad hashemesh. It screens, it judges, it not judges the wrong word, it calibrates, that's my word, the sun. Kach, similarly, Shem Elokim, the name Elokim, Magain l'Shem Havaya Baruch Hu, will screen the name Havaya. I'm going to talk about this in a moment. I just want to finish a few more just to get some terminology here. The Shem Havaya, the name of Hashem, of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which we're going to talk about in some detail. I just want to get some of the wording down. Perusha, what this means is, Shemahava es hakol, it gives existence to all. Mi'ayin liyesh, from non-existence to existence. And remember, this is the theme that we're working on, that the innate indigenous state of existence is non-existence. V'hayud, and so the yud that transforms the word hoveh, which means to be, to yehovet, that it should be, mishameshes al ha'pu'ula shehi b'loshen hoiva b'tamid, means that it is constantly making it in the state of being. So we're going to talk about the words and the grammar and so on. Like Rashi explains on the pasuk that says, thus did Eov all of his days, that he was doing it constantly. Behind it, when this is hachayis hanishba b'chol rega mamish b'chol berurim mimotzi pi Hashem v'rucha imahava oisam yayin liyesh b'chol rega. This is the life force that is being drawn out at every moment, literally, in all of creation, from that which comes forth from the mouth of Hashem. We're going to talk about all of these words, and its spirit, and gives them existence from non-existence to existence. Ex nihilo, you got to say that, that's important. At every moment. It's not just that they were created during the 6 days of creation and then just go on from there. Okay, so let's back up, so to speak. And let's talk first about these two words, these two terms of the names of Hashem. Or let's even back up a step before that and talk about what does it mean that Hashem has a name. We know that the third of the Aseres HaDibros is, do not take my name unnecessarily. And we have, about Shemois. Everybody's got piles and piles of Shemois. It means names, which is a reference to all of our books and so forth that have Hashem's name in it. What is the role of a name? Now, in Hasidus in particular, we strongly emphasize the significance of a name. When we say a name, of course, we're talking about the Hebrew name. We're not just talking about the English words. And we have this concept that names in Torah are prescriptive, not descriptive. Meaning descriptive is it exists, and now we give it a name. So a chair is called a chair because we all agree that when you say the word chair, we all have at least a rough idea of what we're talking about. Now, it's true that there are chairs with arms and there are chairs with 3 legs and chairs with 4 legs, et cetera, et cetera. But when we say the word chair, we all have, again, a rough idea of what we are referring to. But the word chair is essentially at random. The fact that this is a chair and that's called a pencil is essentially because we all decided that when we say pencil, we'll conjure up one image, and when we say chair, we'll conjure up another image. If we would have decided that the object that we sit on is called a pencil and the object we write with is called a chair, we all would have agreed, and that's fine. So we're talking about here about the prescriptive, that the words, the names of everything in its creation come from Hashem and thus are created by the process of there being a name. Now, when it comes to Hashem, what do we mean that Hashem has a name? So a name is both limiting, but it also has and therefore it becomes a mechanism for connection. A person has a name like a person has a phone number. If I don't have anybody who wants to contact me, I have no need for a phone number. The phone is only a method through which other people can contact me. Now, when Hashem gives us his names, he's giving us a method to contact him. Now, we as people also have various names depending on the context of the circumstance with the person with whom we are dealing. Meaning, again, since the primary purpose of a name is for other people to be able to connect with me, so depending on who the person is the name that I give them. So if I'm at the Social Security office, as far as they're concerned, my name is my Social Security number. If it's a child, then my name is my relationship, parent, uncle, aunt, grandparent, and so on. That becomes my name. I mean, a true story. I asked this little kid, I said, I forgot, what's your grandfather's name? And she looked at me and she said, Grandpa. I mean, that's his name. That's a true story. It's based on the context of the relationship. Now, we do this too, although sometimes people are aggressive, and we set the tone of the relationship via the method that we introduce ourselves. So if we introduce ourselves in an authoritative context by being the the doctor, the teacher, the authority, we are trying to set a certain tone in this interaction, a certain formality, a certain distance, whatever it may be. So too are the names of Hashem. Now, there are basically 7 different names of Hashem which are considered sanctified, to the point that we have to treat them with the reverence that we call Shemos, like we talked about. Now, most of the names of Hashem are also words, just like in English. You could say the Lord means Hashem, or it means the authority. So the names of Hashem that we are familiar with, for example, we don't say it literally, so just to illustrate the point, Adoni means my master, my authority. In fact, in modern Hebrew, it's the word that we would use for sir, excuse me, Adoni, sir, boss, that type of thing. Hashem is the authority. When we say Elohim, it also, even in the Chumash, we have it used, and we would say it phonetically, that it means the judges. A court case is called Elohim. They are the judges, because God is the judge. We call him the merciful one. Again, people are merciful, compassionate. There's only one exception, which is the one name that we do not pronounce phonetically, not because we don't know how to vowelize it, but because it's not a word. It would be more closely representative of similar to a chemical formula. It's not meant to be pronounced phonetically because it's not a word. But we look to it for some insight into what it means. And that's the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey name of Hashem. Now, as we explained here, the word Hoveh, Hey Vav Hey, means that it is. Hoveh. Yud Hoveh, we would now translate as that which causes all to be to be. It's somewhat similar. Remember that when Moshe is at at the burning bush, and he says to Hashem, what is your name? I'll come to the people who want to know, what is your name? What meaning? In which characteristic are you coming to them? Are you coming to them as the God of judgment, and therefore whoever hasn't been good is not going out of Mitzrayim? Are you coming as the God of compassion? Which way are you coming? What is your identity? So God says to him in Hebrew, Eka Asher Eka, which we don't really have a translation. What I will be is what I am to be. Meaning what I am is what I will always be. I am unchanging. Eka Asher Eka. What I am is what I will always be. Something along those lines. That's not, whatever. There's not a translatable word. So this is the 2 points. Shemesh Umagein, the sun and its screen, are comparable to the cause of all that is to be, screened through the quality of Elohim. Now, Elohim is mentioned 32 times in the creation story. Bereshis bara Elohim, vayomer Elohim. So Elohim is the power, or it is the character through which the world is created. That's what it does. It creates worlds, Elohim. The first time that we have the Yud Kei Vav Kei is only in what we call a remez. It's not literal. In the story of the creation of Shabbos, it says, and you'll recognize this from Friday Night Kiddush, we say, Vayhi Erev, Yom HaShishi, Vayichulu HaShemayim. Yom HaShishi, the day, the 6th, Vayichulu, when it completed Hashemayim, V'ha'aretz, and the land. Now, Yom HaShishi, Vayichulu HaShemayim, the first letter of those 4 words are Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. Yom, Yud, HaShishi, Hey, Vayichulu, Vav, Hashemayim, the heavens, Hey. So you don't find it immediately. Now, as we know, just from our own life experience, somebody, more than some buddies, have come along and said, see, it's Elohim, it's plural, all mockery. There's the God that creates, but there's a different God, Yahweh, and all this other speculation, which people point to as some justification for, and therefore we can all have ham and cheese. So why does Hashem do that? Because again, When Hashem is mitzamtzem, Hashem goes through the tzimtzum process. When Hashem goes through the tzimtzum process, he is microed and thus vulnerable to ridicule. You see, Hashem is not, and so on, blah, blah, blah. So what would a reasonable person do? Oh, yeah, you think I'm only so simplistic? I'll overwhelm you. That'll teach you. And then you'll know that I am infinite. Now, Hashem does that on occasion. That's the occasion of when Hashem brings miracles. That's what the tzaddik is, to remind us. Because when we have a temptation to say, well, we're only human and everybody makes mistakes. And, Moshe got angry and I get angry and King David did this and I do that. So by dropping in the tzaddikim from time to time, Hashem sort of reminds us that this is only a tzimtzum. So again, the kid who says, oh, my second grade teacher, all they know is the ABCs. And now that I'm in fourth grade, I'm so much smarter than my second grade teacher, is because they forgot that the second grade teacher was teaching you at the second grade level, not because their teacher is at a second grade level, because the students are at the second grade level. And it's a very tough thing for the person to absorb in their life experience. It's rough. And that's the maturity that Hashem is willing to project upon us. That we won't just assume that Hashem is that limited aspect that treats us. So here we continue. V'hinei b'siddur shvachav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when we have lined up the ways in which we praise Hashem. And here's, a very dangerous thing, which we'll talk about. See, if we say, Hagadol, Hagibor, that Hashem is Gadol. Now, the word Gadol, put it in your Google Translate, is always translated as a big. But big is not big enough. The word Gadol essentially means infinite. And then we put Gibor, mighty, which we'll talk about. A Perush HaGadol. What is Gadol? Himidas Chesed. That is the characteristic of chesed. Now, again, chesed is almost always translated as kindness, although even in the Chumash, we have the word chesed translated as without morals, because it means no limits. It's just chesed. There's no restraint, no limits. To just spread out and give life in all stages of awareness, all worlds, and again, worlds don't mean planets, and creations without end. To create from nothing into something. So there's got to be this limitless giving. I mean, it's just like a parent with a child, where no one is disciplining a newborn. There's just got to be absolute giving. The kayamim bechesed chinam, that is sustained with chesed chinam, gratuitous kindness, limitless, no restraints, like the sun. To go right to the most tragic. There were sunny days in Auschwitz. You say, well, it's so gloomy. It's such this. What could be? It's the sun doesn't discriminate between the nice guys and the not nice guys. But the Kras Gedula, why is it called Gedula? Big, large. Ki bo migdulasa shel Kadosh Baruch Hu. It comes from the largesse of Hashem, b'chvedai va'atzmai, in his full-on intensity, kavod meaning honor, but more literally weightiness and intensity. Ki gadol Hashem, for God is gadol. There's that word again, big, giant, infinite. Udulasai, and his greatness, ein cheker, cannot be grasped. That's why big. I mean, the Himalayas are big, but they end. I mean, they're measurable. That's why big isn't a big enough word. And therefore, they have impact on the life force and the creation from nothing into something, to worlds and creations without end. Because it is the impulse of good to do good. That's what it does. It is effortless. Like the sun shines, it's not a conscious decision. Now, just as this compliment, so to speak, is exclusive to Hashem, because no other creation can do that. Remember, the word creation or create is exclusively of Hashem. We don't create. We take what's already there and we reconfigure it. So we take trees and we turn them into desks. We take words and we turn them into poetry. And this character is beyond any grasping or any understanding. Because no creation can grasp this idea of non-existence. I mean, what does nothing look like? It's a trick question. You can't describe it. If you say, well, it's black or it's long, then it's not nothing. Because the whole concept of creation is outside of human intellect. And this is why any attempt to fully understand Hashem is going to expire. That's why we say, if I knew him, I would be him. Now, we talked about this before. That phrase, if I knew him, I would be him, was commonly understood to be a dismissive. You can't know God. If you knew him, you'd be him. The Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, gave a different interpretation of that phrase. He said what it means is, if you know Hashem, you become him. You become completely subsumed within him. You completely forfeit your individual identity. And that's a scary thing. You know, that's the impulse of Aaron's two sons who just didn't want to deal with this world anymore, which is not a bad impulse as long as you, in fact, overcome your desire to not deal with the world and you deal with the world. Because this is exclusively of Hashem. And Hashem and all that he does are in fact absolutely one. And that is, everything about Hashem is Hashem. So sometimes a person says, I don't know what overcame me and I did that. It's not who I truly am. It's not really who I am as a person. Now, of course, it must be somewhat of who he is as a person, otherwise you wouldn't have done it. But it is fairly accurate that we should depict it as not being who the person truly is. But with Hashem, we don't have that. Hashem doesn't have a bad day, so to speak. Okay, let's back up to a couple of ideas here that are important to talk about. When we talk about the praises of Hashem, when we talk about the descriptive of Hashem, pardon me, we are hearkening to a pasuk. It's in Parshas Ekev. It's in the book of Devarim, coming up in a couple of weeks. And the full pasuk reads like this. Ki Hashem Elokeichem, for his God, your God, Hu Elokei Elokim is the God of gods, V'Adoni Adonim, the boss of bosses, Hakel, the powerful one, Hagodol Hagibor. That's what the pasuk that we're working on. We call Hashem Godol, infinite, as we've now described it, and Gibor, mighty. And might, like we talk about at Pirkei Avos, is about the capacity to restrain oneself. Who is mighty? He who can control his impulses. It is more difficult to contain one's impulses than it is to conquer a city. Pardon me. Now, chesed means, again, total giving without any awareness of the recipient, without any calibration to the recipient. So chesed is unrestricted. It's the essential creation, and it's unprompted, meaning Hashem creates the world not because anybody asked him to. It's completely self-driven. That's why we or I shouldn't, that's the wrong way of phrasing it. That is the origin of what we result in saying that God created the world for something that he wants, the desire for the dwelling place amongst the least evidently godly circumstances, dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling place in the lowest worlds. Why? Because it's completely unprompted. It must be something within Hashem that Hashem wants. It's not something that anybody asked him to do, so he's not doing it for somebody else. Hashem creates the world completely self-prompted. That's why it's unlimited, meaning if somebody asked me for it, so then it's going to be limited to what their request is, or limited to how much of their request I'm interested in fulfilling. That's what the characteristic of it is. So these characteristics, like we said, are called gedula because they are infinite, and that's why they can be the process of creation. Even when we say it is the nature of good to do good, again, it's not in response to a request for kindness. And that's the crucial point here, that it is completely of Hashem's own interest that Hashem creates the world, which leaves us with the conclusion, I guess, that the world is created for Hashem's purpose. So ironically, or I shouldn't say ironically, so counterintuitively, rather than the presumption that Hashem is here to serve me, that is to make my life better, which we would certainly agree, our question is, or our objective is, how do we fulfill the purpose for which Hashem created the world? Meaning, the common question is, why do you like Shabbos so much? Is saying, what is Hashem doing for you? If I do mitzvahs, will it make my life better? Will it get me a job, have friends, get me into heaven, et cetera, et cetera? Which our answer is yes. I mean, we believe that because Hashem is kind, that what he wants is a kindness for us as well. Yet the ultimate driving force is that it is in the service of the purpose for which Hashem created the world. And that's the question that we always have to ask ourselves. Is it furthering this purpose of creation? Okay, so we're up to this point where the Alter Rebbe is saying that Hashem is perfectly aligned with his midos. So, and again, this is another common point. The Alter Rebbe doesn't say this here, but just another example of it is when we do a mitzvah. Again, we're saying, yes, that is the infinity of Hashem. This isn't just some sort of busy work to keep the world in order so that something else will have purpose and value. The mitzvah itself is the purpose of creation. That is the reason why we are fulfilling the mitzvah. When we eat the matzah, that's the infinity of Hashem. When we put on tefillin, that's the infinity of Hashem. When we put it in the mezuzah, that's the infinity of Hashem. Okay. Just as no created intellect can comprehend its creator. I mean, we can't even understand another person. We can't truly even understand ourselves. We can't understand the creator because, and this is always going to be that breakdown point, we cannot comprehend something as nothing. We have no comprehension of nothing, meaning, as my friend says, a simple analogy. If we forget our dependence on oxygen, we can go in a pool, go underwater, and then you realize that you need oxygen. It's not something that maybe we commonly think about, our dependence on oxygen. But since we can get into a circumstance where there is no oxygen, we can go underwater, we can be reminded of our dependence on oxygen. However, since we can't get outside of Hashem, it becomes, in that sense, more difficult to appreciate our dependence on Hashem because we don't have an option to not be in alignment with Hashem. We don't have a circumstance where our connection with Hashem is severed. We don't have a contrast. That's what we're looking for, contrast. Our world, our life is comprised of contrasts. In part, I know that I'm here because I'm not somewhere else. There's here and there's there. There's today, yesterday, and tomorrow. The Yud K Vav K name is to say that there is no contrast, there is no separation. And we talked about this, I believe we talked about this before. The first pasuk in Chumash is often translated as, in the beginning, God created heaven and earth, meaning there was a beginning. And now God, but Rashi says something markedly different. Rashi reads it as, in the beginning of creation, God created heaven and earth. That's not the beginning, because of course Hashem predates creation. And even the concept of predating doesn't work, because how do you have existence before you have time? Well, it doesn't make, that doesn't make any sense. Right, this is what I'm saying. We can't understand that, because our existence is based on time and space. So how do we have existence before creation, before time and space? Right, that's where it's ultimately always going to break down. And that's why we get these glimpses from time to time with miracles, tzaddikim, and so on, these characteristics that are outside the purview of basic creation. And that's what the Alter Rebbe sort of assures us. So you're not really going to ever be able to fully grasp this and understand it. But we can imagine it and we can aspire to it. Like it says, Olam Chesed Yibona. The world is built on Chesed. Now, the world is built on Chesed. The world certainly seems to be built on Kivura. When I say Kivura, I don't mean harshness. I just mean predictability, repetition, orderliness. Right? The world is basically a functional entity. The sun rises, the day goes by. There is process and procedure. There isn't just random chaos all the time. And Chesed suggests more like chaos than it does like rigid orderliness. So just like we cannot get our arms around the concept of total chesed, we similarly cannot get our arms around the characteristic of Kivura. And this is what leads us to often think of Kivura as some sort of cruelty. It's like we're just being mean, but it's not. It is actually the kindness. Otherwise, you get overwhelmed. That Hashem wants to, and therefore engages this characteristic of Kivura to express himself to the creations, to give them existence, and to sustain them. Begiloi, in a way that's evident, that's reachable. But the only way he can do that is, again, to conceal himself. Without that concealment, we just become so overwhelmed by godliness that we cease to have any identity. It's the classic thing, why the Jews didn't want to leave Har Sinai, why they didn't want to leave the wilderness, why Noah didn't want to leave the ark. Godliness is everywhere. Who wants to engage in the world? So much so that God's divine light is concealed within the created being. So the created being thinks that he exists. He thinks he's a real person. He doesn't see himself as just an expression of godliness like the sun ray. He thinks he exists. I mean, that's how we start off our morning, why you have to say, Moida ani, but I exist and I give acknowledgement. And then hopefully through the process of davening, we get to that total sense of subsumption within the infinity of Hashem. This idea that we have our own existence is only because of the Kivura of Hashem, that he withholds the overwhelming sun so that the sunlight appears to have identity. And the reason Hashem does that is like the father or the parent or the teacher who doesn't overwhelm the student with their brilliance and thus allows the student to have their own brilliance. Because as long as the teacher is overwhelming the student with their brilliance, the student has no capacity to express their own brilliance because they're just subsumed within the brilliance of the teacher or the parent. this, we can't comprehend it. That is, we can't comprehend our non-existence. We just can't. We can't get to that. That's a little bit. We talk about the four who entered the Pardes. One died, one became insane, one became an apostate, and only Rabbi Akiva entered in peace and left in peace. What happened to the others? They said, I can't go back. I can't go back into the world after this. So one died. He just, like Aaron's two sons. The other just couldn't get his arms around it. He became insane. And Elisha ben Avuya said, well, then I guess got to totally reject this. And only Rabbi Akiva, whose objective was not his own spiritual benefit, but was a way of making peace in the world, was able to integrate this into the world. You know, not being able to understand something doesn't mean we can't function. Even though that this seichel cannot be comprehended from a creation of nothing into something, because we cannot understand nothingness. Okay, we have a hand raised, but you have to unmute.
Well, just a quick question. Okay, we can understand, we can say or try to get our arms around that, you know, that we don't exist. But one thing seems real is that because at least I'm here in some fashion, Hashem gave me specificity.
Yes.
So he wanted me here, he wanted you here, or, you know, I don't know the terms to use, but we do have a specificity, and that is a good thing. I mean, you know, we're supposed to find our place in the Torah, etc. So not that we can pat ourselves on the back or, you know, get big-headed about it, but the fact that we exist in any form should be kind of, you know, make us feel a little bit good, right?
We're not against that. We exist in absolute form, and our existence is not only true, it's that Hashem is giving us consistent and constant existence, so it must be pretty important to him to give us existence. And once we recognize that our existence is the existence because we are on this mission from Hashem, that becomes the stopple against us just wandering off and doing quote unquote whatever we want.
Right. That's what I was trying to get.
So, it's very much the parsha that we just had is called Shlach, which means to be an agent. And part of the problem of the 12 agents is that 10 of them became spies. That is, they forgot that they worked for Moshe.
Right.
They started to think it was their own thing.
Right.
And that's when they got off their mission. Okay, now, even though this is almost the end of the chapter, I'm going to deliberately stop here. I'm going to point out to you why. If you look here, where we're up to in the Hebrew, which is the chitas for either the 14th or the 15th of Sivan, you'll note that there's a square bracket right after the period. You see that in the Hebrew side? Just before the word vihina, there's a square bracket. Do you see that? Anybody? Look in the Hebrew side of the, I don't know, I don't have the lessons in Tanya. I don't know if somebody has it. They can unmute and say what page it is or where you could find it. But if you look in the Hebrew side of the Tanya, I imagine it's in the English too, there's a bracket. Do you see the bracket?
Parentheses, it's not a bracket.
It's a round parenthesis?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, whatever it is. In mine, it's a square. Now, if you look to the end of the chapter, there is no closed parentheses, right? You don't see any closed parentheses there. Now, where does this parentheses end? So it appears like, okay, this must be some sort of typo, that they forgot the close parentheses, because generally speaking, when you have an open parentheses, you have a closed parentheses. The closed parentheses is the end of chapter 5. Now, there is a theory which we'll explore next week, that this whole piece from the middle of, or this last few lines of chapter 4, up to and including all of chapter 5 is parenthetical. So we'll discover that at the next class. Okay, which is going to be again in 2 weeks, because I'm not going to be here next week. So